Perfect.
Everybody, chapter bed's not working?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. I just nudged it, but I wanted to make sure it was okay.
Huh?
It's all good. It's all good.
It says what?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so we're turning to chapter Beis, Posik, Kof, Hey, 25.
It's so cool. Cold?
Cool. Cool.
Cool. It's cool. Weather-wise and ambient-wise and cool as well.
Well, actually, we can start with chapter 24, Kof Dalet. I'm sorry, with Posik. Posik 24. But before we begin, I want to tell you guys a story. And that will help us sort of lead in to what we're trying to get to. What you people ever heard of Reb Mechel Zlatosheva? It's a little bit of a mouthful of a name. Reb Mechel Zlatosheva. Never heard of him? He was a leading Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. Very leading Talmud. And he was a person that was just completely and utterly out of this world altogether. And after the Stolkes of the Baal Shem Tov, after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov, he remained like a figure on his own. He didn't become attached to the Mezritcha Magi, like most of all the other Talmudim did. He and another great Talmud called Pinchas Koretzer, they sort of remained, they never became Talmudim of the Mezritcha Magi, but he was a very great person. He's known in Lubavitch, because he used to, when the Baal Shem Tov got together with his Talmudim, they used to sing Nigunim, as is no alone, before the Baal Shem Tov said anything. So this Reb Mechel Zlatosheva, he used to be the one that said the Nigunim. He used to organize the Nigunim, and he himself, he composed a very famous Niggun. It's called Reb Mechel's Niggun. And the Rebbe Rashab said in the name of his father, the Rebbe Marash, who said in the name of the Rabbeim, that if you sing this Niggun, then you arouse great mercy, how do you call it, Rachamim Rabbim Lamayla. And if when you sing the Niggun, you have in mind something, then Hashem will listen to your prayer. And it's supposed to be a Niggun that's, it's visited with very high powers. I don't suppose you guys ever heard of, well, you probably may have heard of it, but you may not have known that it was reverend. So I don't have time now to sing you the whole Niggun, it's quite long. But I'll just tell you how it starts. You may have heard of it. They sort of begins like this. Never heard them? That's what Mechel is named. Al upon him, as he was very, very amazingly holy person. So when he took over the job in the city of Zlatosheva, he was like the Maggid. In those days they used to have people that their whole thing was to say drosses to the tzibur and to rouse the tzibur. The Alter Rebbe was a Maggid in Liozna, He didn't want to accept the Rabbanos, and he called himself the Maggid of Liozna at one time, anyway, this Reb Mechel Zlatosheva, he behaved what the other people in the town thought was very unusual and very peculiar. And the Baal Shem Tov didn't used to daven late. the Baal Shem Tov used to daven quite early in the morning. Of this Reb Michael, his last Jew, due to different factors in his life, he used to daven late. He would start davening late and finish late. So there were a lot of people who in the town who were led by a certain person. Well, I won't mention his name because you might get it confused with somebody else. I don't want to cause any confusion, but there was a leading non-chassid in the town who led a whole sort of group of people that they were very not in favor of the Baal Shem Tov and so on. So they noticed, that he had these strange habits, and they used to sort of make protest. They used to protest against him, but he was just so humble and so, modest and so completely bottled that he never used to pay attention, and he would always sort of, somehow or another avoid open, clash and conflict with them. However, there was one afternoon when they came into the Beis HaMedrash, and there was no minyan for mincha. And they got together, people, and all of a sudden they realized they were missing one person. And who was that person? That he was usually there, but he wasn't there. And that was just Rav Mechele, the Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. He wasn't there. So this leading misnagid who was in the shul, he said, "Oh, I know what he's doing. He's up to all these things, and he is stopping us having a minyan." And he got tremendously angry, and he ran into Rav Mechele's house, and he said he met the Rebbetzin, and he said, "Where is your husband? We need him in the shul for a minyan." So she said, "Oh, I can't do anything because he's taking an afternoon rest. Well, he's resting." So the guy got furious. He said, "But it's already the time of the Shiur Klali. We have to double minute. What's he doing, sloughing?" But this time she said, "I can't interfere. I don't know what this." She got all upset. So he ran past her into and it was already getting dark. The sun was already. And he runs into Reb Mechele's room, and he's laying on the bed and everything. But all of a sudden, he sees that the sun is up like in the middle of the day. And the sun is shining through the window onto Reb Mechele's bed, like it would be, maybe 1:30, 12:32 or 1:32 or something in the afternoon. And his eyes, jumped out on stalks, because he knew there was already, as far as he was concerned, it was already 5:30 in the afternoon, almost dark. It was almost the Shiur Klali. So he couldn't believe his eyes, and he walked over to the window and he looked down and he saw that the sun was way up in the heaven, and the sun was shining in through the window, and Reb Mechele was very peacefully sloughing. So all of a sudden, he understood that there's something very strange and very unusual here, and he's still not in that league, you know what I mean? He felt all of a sudden that he can't complain anymore, because obviously another ball game, And he ran out into the street, and he sees in the street it's about 5:30 in the afternoon. It's dark, it's getting dark. So after the Shiur, so after that, he decided that he would never say anything more to Reb Mechele. He would never interfere with him, because he sees it's like it's another ball game. Maybe you might stop the day on him or something. Yeah. From then on, he was quiet. Later, Reb Mechele got up, and he came to shul. And when he came to shul, it was just becoming the Shiur, and just was getting dark in the afternoon. So everybody's eyes, just jolted out. They said, what's going on? This man is, he's got some superhuman powers. From then on, Reb Mechele had peace in the town. He went ahead with his Baal Shem Tov behavior, but he was recovered from the Baal Shem Tov, and everybody left him alone. So I think you agree that's quite a remarkable story.
Absolutely.
So I'll tell you just one more little story, and then we'll get on to what we want to talk about. The other story is that once the Baal Shem Tov called a lot of his students, who were always very close to him in and around where he was, and it's one on the Baal Shem Tov made a lot of journeys. He went different places. He would often travel without previous notice to some place. So all of a sudden he said, we're getting into the coach, and bring some bread and some kelim to wash our hands, and we're going out into the field. So what are you going to do in the field? He said, we'll see when we get there. So they get out into this field, and there's a lot of, sheep and cattle in the field. And at the edge of the field for the behemoths to drink is like a stream. You follow? So the Baal Shem Tov said, put up a table and put out the bread. You know, they didn't bring in all sorts of posh things to eat with the bread, but at least they had bread and salt. And the Baal Shem Tov said, we're going to wash for a Suda. So the Baal Shem Tov went and he washed his hands in the street, took over to clean. He washed his hands, and he walked over and he sat down and he made a moitzi. When the Baal Shem Tov made a moitzi and some others were coming to the table, all of a sudden they see that all the behemoths in the area and all the sheep all stand up on 2 feet. All the behemoths, yeah. And this is actually brought down in Sefer Chabad. I didn't realize it was brought down in Sefer Chabad, but what does the Rebbe not bring? The Rebbe brings everything. So there's a certain place where the Rebbe also brings this story. And all of a sudden all the behemoths get up and they all start walking on 2 feet. And the sheep, they all start walking around on 2 feet. So all the Talmidim, their eyes just, jumping out on stalks, what on earth is it? And the Baal Shem Tov is sitting very calmly, and he's eating from the bread, and so the Talmud said, Rabbeinu, what's happened here? So the Baal Shem Tov said that if a person, wherever he is, he reveals the emes madrega of man, of Odom, if he reveals that level, then it has an effect on the whole universe around. And I think maybe according to quantum physics nowadays, that could be supportive of this idea, because as far as I understand, the quantum physics indicates that you can affect all sorts of things if you just decide the right way. But that's derech hagav. That's what the Rebbe says, that you have to think good, and then it's vetzayin good. You know that. Tracht good, vetzayin good. So the Baal Shem Tov, Aridei, that he revealed a proper way of eating, not eating like an animal. The trouble is that we eat like an animal. Therefore, when we're eating, we're sort of like, to a certain extent, we have a certain, what you might call, equality to the animal kingdom. Or somebody who is a chilo is what the Rebbe Rashab calls an amayna, and it's also brought down in different places and considers achilas odom, that it's an achila which belongs to the madrega of odom. And this is something similar to what we find in the Beis Hamikdash, that somebody who had a chait and he would bring, it's the 9 days, so it's good to talk about the Beis Hamikdash, that he would bring a korban into the Beis Hamikdash, and they would slaughter the korban, and then the koyanim would eat a korban chatav, was eaten by the koyanim. So the Gemara says that alidei, what they call them, the koyanim would eat, but that would cause a kapora, they call an atonement in the sin for the person who had done not good. That they ate, and that eating was mechaper for the He had brought down a kapara for the person who had sinned. So we see that there's such a thing that somebody can eat, and through his eating, he is poil, how do you call it? A change in the atmosphere and what you might call the makeup of the universe in such a way that that atones for somebody who's done a chait. And that's called achilas oram. The achil of the kohanim is called achilas adam. That if you eat like the kohanim used to eat, then you can change things, and you can even affect other people in such a way that they will be completely atoned for. I mean, I would have thought you guys would have, somebody fall off a chair or something and pick him up. I mean, that's an amazing thing. That the kohanim eat and somebody else gets a kapara for his chait. Is a simon that if you eat in the right way, you can alter the whole flow of the universe. So the Hadikanim, the Baal Shem Tov, he made a moitzi, and he began to eat the bread, the way the Kohanim used to eat in the Beis HaMikdash. So all of a sudden all the behemoths all stopped being behemoths. All the behemoths stopped being behemoths. And what does that mean? There's a Mishnah in Masechta Klali where the Mishnah calls man holchei shtayim. If you're a man, then you go on 2 feet. If you're an animal, you go on 4 feet. Right? And if you go on 4 feet, then what happens? Your head tends to be always down, Your head is always down towards it. You're walking on 4 feet and your head hangs down, But if you stand on 2 feet, then what happens? You look upwards. So if you look upwards, what happens? Ois behema. That's in Yiddish, that means finish behema, no more behema. If you look up, the whole thing with a behema is that he looks down the whole time. He's only 4. He's only 4. He's always looking for some grass. He's always monkeying. That's a behema. But if you look upward, just imagine if the behemoth would look up to the heavens all the time, what would happen to him? He would starve, He wouldn't be a behemoth anymore. So that's exactly what the Baal Shem Tov, that's what he caused happened to these behemoths, that they all stood up on 2 feet. Oh. So, all the Talmidim, they just, they were completely out. And then later, the closed man that the Baal Shem Tov was there, that's what was happening. And then when they benched and they got back into the coach, they started doing. So what happened? They all went back to being behemoths. In other words, when the Baal Shem Tov took away his hashpah, they all went back to being behemoths. And so that's what's going to happen when Moshiach comes. When Moshiach is going to be mitgaleh, that we're going to stop being behemoths forever. Period. It's going to happen that all the behemoths are going to change. Well, according to the Rebbe, according to the Rambam, maybe after a certain time, after Mashiach's come, not immediately, but after a certain time, then there's going to be miraculous things happening with all the behemoths.
Wow.
They're all going to be very friendly one with the other.
Right.
That's all, the whole thing,
The wolf and
Zev, Kevev, that a lion's going to lay down together with the sheep, with the guns.
The wolf
The
and
guns to
something.
do.
A lion
Okay,
and a
so
sheep?
up to here is the story. Now we want to examine a verse that we have here in the parashas. And that is like this. You know that Sefer Dvarim is a repetition of the whole Torah on the part of Moshe Rabbeinu. You know that. That really the giving of the Torah per se ceases at the end of Bamidbar. That is the completion of the whole Torah. And then the Sefer Dvarim is a repetition.
Why?
On the part of Moshe Rabbeinu. So not only does Moshe Rabbeinu repeat everything that was given in the form of the mitzvahs, nor he describes all the events that led up to those in Yonim, and where the Yidden, Rashi brings right at the beginning of the parasha, that he sort of hints, he doesn't say openly at the beginning exactly where, but he's giving them a good etiquette, a good talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. What we call Divrei Chocha. Okay, so the Divrei Chocha can keep going the whole way through the parasha, and then he tells how they were in the desert the whole 40 years. And they went around, and he mentions the Chet of Maraglim, the story of the sinners and the whole thing. He doesn't mention the Chet Egel in this parasha. In next week's parasha, he talks about the Chet Egel. Over here, he misses it out. However, that's a whole thing which I'm not going into now. Comes along, he says, we've already been through the whole desert for 40 years, and we're now approaching the east side of the Jordan in order to go over into Eretz Israel. So let's do a little bit of testing. What happened just before they all went, to the east side of the Yarden, and they went over? There was a couple of big sort of wars happened there. Does anybody remember what was happening there?
Yericho.
Huh?
Yericho?
No, Yericho is already in Eretz Israel.
Midian.
Yericho is in Eretz Israel.
And they kill all the Midian.
They came eventually opposite Yericho.
It was later, right?
Huh?
Sichon and
So there were
Oig.
two big kings that were called Sichon
Oig.
Oig.
Nice.
And they were kings of the Amorim. Right? And the Yidden conquered them, even though everybody said, no way anybody can ever conquer them. Because they were like hired by all the other nations around to guard any passage through their area towards the banks of the Jordan or anywhere like that. They prevented anybody coming in, and yet nonetheless the Yidden had a tremendous victory, didn't they? Yiduas Hashem v'simcha. They had a tremendous victory, and they beat them. And what did they do? They took over their country. And who took it over? Does anybody remember? 2.5 tribes.
Menashe and Gad and Reuben.
Chatzi Shevet.
Chatzi Gad and
No.
Chatzi Reuven.
Gad Reuven completely.
Yeah.
Chatzi Shevet Menashe. 2.5 tribes. They took their area over there. Okay, so here we see that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu like this. He says, Kumu Se'u, you must get up and start traveling. Vivru es Nahal Arnoin. And Nahal Arnoin was a certain river that's mentioned a couple of times here, that like separated between the main area where the Sichon was in charge, which part of it, where he was in charge also, was what belonged to the Moabites. That's a whole story of how the Yidden had the right to take that from him and everything. It's a whole story, but anyway, that was it. And this Nahal Arnoin was like the border. So the Eibusha says to them, go over the border. If you go over the border, what's going to happen? Sichon is not going to like that. And Sichon is big. He's very big. And he's got an ally who lives further up on the mountains. What's he called?
Og.
He's called Oig. And he's really big time.
Oig.
Now this fellow Oig, he's inhumanly big. Yeah? So,
How big?
And his forces are also similar.
How big
So-
was he?
Huh?
How big was he?
Oh, I know. He was about, according to the Gemara, his bed was 10 amos long.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much is 10?
So that's about 20 feet.
Wow.
How much is that in meters?
How many
How do they
stories?
say you need a 40-foot pole? How's the old saying in English? No, to get to him you need a 40-foot pole. Anyway, he was pretty big. So Hashem says to them, go over as Nachal Amayim, pass through
100 meters
Nachal
is
Amayim.
2 basketball nets.
Wow.
And he says, Re'ei nasati biyotcho esichoin melech heshboin ha'emoiri v'esatzoi. I'm going to give the sichon into your hands and always land. Ochel reish, begin to take it over. Yeah? Ve'hiz go boi melchamo, and deliberately start with him war. By the Moabites and by the Ammonites, Hashem said, don't make war with them. Because they are the Bnei Lot, they were like relatives of Avraham Avinu. Therefore, he didn't want to make war directly with them. With the Sihon guy, he said, you have to make
War.
You have to make war. Start up with him a war, and then in the next passage, Hashem says to him, Hayim hazeh, ochel teis pachtecho v'yiroscho al pnei ho'amim, tachas kol hashamayim. He said, on this day, I'm going to begin to put your fear, your pachad and your fear. It's two different types of fear. Pachad means worry from a distance, and yira means, when you see something, you get affected by it. Al pnei yehoamim, and this fear, this pachad that's going to be on all the people, tachas kol hashamayim, underneath all the heavens, asher yishmiyun shimacho. People are going to hear your hearing, your news about you, shimacho. And they're going to tremble and how they could become scared miponecha, in front of you. So who's he talking to in parashas? Talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says, you know what? He said, I'm going to begin today to put your fear on all the people. Right, Levi? Putting your fear on all the people. Did you have any lunch?
What?
Did you have lunch?
Yeah. I had some.
Maybe that's why you're a little bit versloven. But you had lunch.
Yeah.
Did you have a little bit of a break as well?
Yeah.
You should. You should always take a little bit of a schleffel. Put your head down.
Okay.
See, he did. He put his head down.
Who? Me?
So therefore,
How about now?
Hashem promises Moshe Rabbeinu that his fear and people are going to be scared, all the countries, underneath all the heavens. Now what does that mean, underneath all the heavens? That would appear to mean everybody. Yeah? So comes along Rashi, and Rashi says, what do you mean underneath all the heavens? So says Rashi, yeah, tachas kol hashamayim, says Rashi, loma, on the chamo l'Moshe, b'yoyim milchemes oi, svarim acherim sichoi. Some other people say there wasn't milchemes oi, it was milchemes sichoi. And that's a very interesting difference of opinion amongst the great Meforshim. They're based on certain, but let's say it's written sichoi. I mean, they both got involved in the war anyway, so it doesn't really matter a great deal. Yeah, on that day, v'noida hadova tachas kol hashamayim. That they had occurred, the sun stopped, it stood. The sun stood for Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu saw that he needed to really beat Sichon the right way, he needed more time. You see, in the old days, once it became dark, they didn't have, all these flashes and, neon lights and the whole thing that they got nowadays. Once it got dark, the enemy could disappear, So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want it to become dark. So it didn't. And he said the sun stood for Moshe Rabbeinu.
Wow.
That's what it means. Tachas kol hashamayim. Because if it's underneath the whole, if the sun stops, then everybody benefits and has need of the sun. And so all of a sudden they see the sun's not moving. You know? And according to the Gemara, this went on for 36 hours.
Wow. So
Wow.
did we like lose a day and a half? Like did we stop in time? Did we stop in time for one?
That is pretty tremendous.
Did we stop in time for 1 day and a half?
Right.
We stop in time.
No. Don't know if we're stopping time. That's also an interesting question. The fact that they measured time is a sign that the time didn't stop.
What? I
think
The
Gemara
fact that
said-
they measured time
Just one
means that the
second.
time didn't stop.
The Gemara said it stopped for a heck of a long time. For a long time. And in that time, they were able to completely defeat Sichoin. And meantime, Ui thought he's going to get involved. And Ui was positive that nobody would be able to beat him. So he came out also, instead of staying where he was. But had he stayed where he was inside a big city, it would have been incomparably harder to get him. But he came running out. He was so devoted to Sichoin that he came running out. And he also, you know the famous story, Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu only came up to about his ankle or something like that, but Moshe Rabbeinu killed him, the whole mice. So, he brought a mountain and put it on top of him, you know the whole, possibly the whole story. So, l'choira, if we look at this, then our eyes jump out on stalks. What on earth is going on here? Rashi just brings us, it's just sort of patterns, another Rashi, and there's one before, everything sort of, all of a sudden, I mean, this is an unbelievable mess, that the sun should stand for 36 hours.
Yes.
That's it.
It's crazy.
And we're soon coming to Yehoshua, and by him it was even longer.
By Yehoshua?
Yeah, by Yehoshua.
When? Okay.
So, does anybody know by whom else the sun stood?
The Baal Shem Tov.
That war.
Eliyahu.
The story you just told.
By
Baal Shem
Yeshua.
Tov.
Yeah,
Later
sure.
on, when they'd already gone into Eretz Yisrael, and they'd beaten Yericho and they'd moved further than Yericho, then there was a whole problem with a group of people called the Gibeonites. And they were a whole troublesome group, and they tried to prevent certain things happening, and Yeshua made war against them to remove this preventation that they should be able to move further with the conquering of Eretz Yisrael. So it wasn't actually a war of conquering Eretz Yisrael. It was a war like of overcoming certain forces that were like interfering with the actual conquering. Mm-hmm. And it was, they were very, very, they made a lot of fierce resistance, and Yeshua saw that he needed the whole rest of the day. The sun was already like in the middle of the heavens, and he didn't want it to go down. So what did he do, Yeshua? Does anybody know?
Stop the sun.
Right. But he said a very special word, Yeshua. And he said, Shemesh v'givoin
You're right.
doi.
Doing? Like stop.
Yeah, but does dom mean to stop?
Dumb.
Blood.
It does in a way, but
Dumb.
it means to go quiet.
Oh, stop
Doing.
speaking.
Huh?
Stop speaking.
Yeah, in other words, if you're in the middle of singing or saying something,
Singing.
and people say to you, dom, yeah, it's true, you sort of cease what you're doing, but you cease making a certain noise that you might have otherwise made, and you become quiet. For example, in the Israeli army, if you want to stand to attention, you're told to stand to attention. It says that they say to you, "Tamdu daim." Tamdu daim means that you have to, that you got to be quiet. You don't say anything, and you stand like that. So that's called Amidas doing. So Yeshua said to the sun, Shemesh, he said, Begivoin doing. But he not only said to the Shemesh, he said to the moon. He said in the moon, also you stay where you are. Because once it gets past a certain hour on the day, the moon starts moving in. And if the moon moves in, then it's already like dark, you know.
Yeah.
So he said to both, Yeshua, he said, sun, you have to stand, and moon, you don't move. You don't come in, you stay where you are also. Now what do you guys say about that? I mean that's a pretty
Crazy.
That's a pretty amazing thing. And the Gemara in Masechta Taanis says that Yeshua stopped, he stopped the sun for 48 hours. Wow. He stopped the sun for 48 hours. And there were also like other things that stopped. And he made like a major cessation in the development of what you might call the flow of the day. I mean, this is pretty tremendous.
Wow.
It's very crazy.
Wow. Amen.
So now, what do you think about that? If he stopped the sun for 48 hours, and a lot of them unfortunately go into this, I mean, the sun is only part of a huge universe of things. And they all move in different ways, you know, they've all got different orbits, and they all move very, very exactly, you know. Just imagine if all of a sudden one of them stops, you know. And particularly quite a large one, and a major one, like the sun, yeah, that he's got a whole sort of, a series of planets that are, you know, in and around him, gravitationally, you know. All of a sudden he stops. I mean,
Everything has to stop, maybe?
So that means that other things also have to stop.
Probably, yeah.
'Cause otherwise it would be like
They'll hit into each other.
a
Bumper cars.
collision or an upset.
If the moon stops, there's no waves.
This leads to become a very immense nest. And that's got to be a term. And yet, nonetheless, that happened by Yeshua, and it's written over there that there's never been, it's written in Yeshua, it's written that there's never been before this day and after this day. There's also never been such a happening that man spoke to a heavenly body and told it to stop. There's never been such a day before. So what do you say about that?
Well, they contradict each other or what?
Huh?
Saying that there never was a man who stopped. There was never a man who stopped ahead.
So who's before who? Moshe Rabbeinu is before Yeshua?
No.
Yeah.
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 Uh-huh.
Yeah. So what? Yeah, it's contradicting.
So Chazal has been. Also, I'd like to ask just another, what they call, in the language of the yeshivas, what they call a klotz kasha. You know, I'd like to ask a sort of a silly type kasha. And that is that Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, way back at the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, of all the Torah in Sefer Bereshit, Yaakov Avinu, when he left Beersheba to go to where Lavan lived, to Haran, what did Rashi say? That the Shemesh went down early, so he would stop at a certain point, and exactly that point where he stopped was connected to Beis Hamikdash, you know, the whole thing. Oh, amazing thing, that if you take like a ladder between there, that's when he saw the ladder, and put it up, then you meet at the straight part of the ladder, you meet Yerushalayim. So therefore, he had to stop at that point. In order to stop him moving, Hashem brought down the sun early. But I mean, you guys should immediately say, well, yeah, that's right. But when a time before that, when he was going across the river, and he met up with the angel of Esau, and he damaged his leg, and certainly that Yaakov Avinu limped. Remember the whole story? That the angel of Esau affected Yaakov Avinu's thigh, and he limped. So it's written that the Abisha brought up the Shema especially in the early hours of the morning, earlier than what it normally does, so as to hit the leg of Yaakov Avinu especially, and the Shemesh has like a healing power, you know that. So the Shemesh healed somewhat the whole thigh of Yaakov Avinu.
Wow.
So Chabsat. I mean, there's already been things with things like the Shemesh, coming up earlier, going down late. But, what's all this? It's written over there by Yeshua that it's never been before and never will be, and never will be after. So it comes along to Erikoid, the Gemara in the sector of Veda Zorah, and the Gemara says, what do you mean there's never been before, never been after? Yeah, this Moshe Rabbeinu. He just told me that Moshe Rabbeinu stopped the sun over there in Sichoin. He stopped it. And then the Gemara brings another case of where the sun stopped. Do you happen to know about it? It's a story brought down in the Gemara, and this also got to do a little bit with Tisha B'Av. And that is that there's a famous person called Nakdimoin Ben Gurion. Have you heard of him? Not the Ben Gurion that you guys have heard of. But his name was Nakdimoin Ben Gurion. Now what was with Nakdimoin Ben Gurion? He was a Gvir. You know what a Gvir is? A very rich person. Had a lot of money. But he knew, how to use his money for good thing. So the Gemara tells him the Sekta Tainis a story that Nakdima ben Gurion once came up with a whole load of Yidden that came up for Pesach to the Elias Rego. They used to come up to the Beis Hamikdash to be Makayim, going up. They're going up for 3 times a year. You have to go up to the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach and on Shavuos on Sukkot. You know about Elias Rego? You know the whole thing. It's called Elias Rego.
Yeah.
So all the people came up to Yerushalayim, the whole of Yerushalayim used to get packed with people, and yet nonetheless there happened a Nes, Keseda. You guys know about the Nes. That happened, this is another Nes. That happened Keseda, that nobody ever said, it's too crowded for me in Yerushalayim. I got to sleep, I don't want to go up to Rech Chasvishol. Nobody ever said that. Yeah, and that's on it. Anyway, this fellow Nakdima Ben Gurion, he came up with everybody, and also it was very hot. I mean, Baruch Hashem, it's been a bit warm today, but on the whole, the summer so far has been good this year. But then it was very hot, and people are all thirsty. And even though Yerushalayim is a big city and everything, but they couldn't, they didn't have, hoses and pipes like that they got nowadays. They didn't have enough water for the oil regalim. So what did Nakdima Ben Gurion do? He went up to a big goy, one of these big goyim that happened to be in Eretz, live in Eretz at the time, and he had water. He had like these, what's called mayonot. He had
springs.
What do you call it? Springs, very nice. These well springs coming up from under the earth, but they were in his ownership, and he was keeping them for himself. So Nakdima Ben Gurion comes up to him, and he said, listen, I want you to lend me 12 of these mayonot. You lend me? And he said, either I will pay you, I will give you back the water through the mayonot, and so forth. I'll make sure you get back the water. Exactly how he thought he was going to do that, I don't know. And he said, or if not, he said, I'll pay you back in money what the water is worth, even more than what, I'll give you a certain sum of money. what he told me he's prepared to give him. He said, but I don't have on me right now the cash. But he said, if the water doesn't come back and refill the mayonot, yeah, then I'll give you the money. But if the mayonot get all filled up again, then we agree that I don't owe you the money because you got back the whole water. So the guy said, okay, fair enough. They make an agreement, and he gives him use of these famous they call it well springs and all that, don't they? I've often suggested we should have a big samovar of coffee in the middle of the table. Be able to just draw on that. So
my note of coffee.
Oh, my note of coffee. So all this, all these people that came up with the Yerushalayim, they all drank this water, and everybody's happy and everything's fine. But in the meantime, it's terribly hot, and there's no rain. There's no rain is falling. And at that time of the year, rain is beginning to sort of stop after basically the rain stopped. So Nadim and Ben Gurion's beginning to get a little bit, concerned. What's going to be with all the water? If the water doesn't go back, he's going to have to pay this guy the sum of money. And he doesn't want to give him the money. He's a guy, and he wasn't particularly present, this fellow. So he didn't want to give him the money. But so the days are going by. So comes the last day, and this guy sends already to a messenger to Nadim and Ben Gurion, where's my water, And if by the end of the day the water's not there, then you have to fork out. So Ben Gurion sends it back. But I got hours on the day yet, I got a long time on the day. What are you nudging me? When will be the time? Then inform me. It goes for a few hours. The sun's starting to go down slightly. And he sends him another message. Says, no, where's all the water? There's no rain. What's happening with my water or my money? So Nadim McGuiran sends it back a messenger. There's still a few out there. So what happens? What happens is that Nadim and Ben Gurion goes into the Beis HaMikdash, and he prays to Hashem. He covered himself with towels and his head and everything, and he prayed to Hashem that something should happen. Well, thank you. So all of a sudden, it's very, very, it appears as if it's already become dark, but all of a sudden, it pours down with rain. Over mamish pours tremendous rain, fills up all of the mayonas that this guy gave out, and they're all, bubbling away, and everything's fine. He's got all of the dust. And Nadim and Ben Gurion thinks, this is great. So all of a sudden the guy sends him a messenger, and he said, I'm sorry. He said, but that rain began falling after the sun had gone down. So he said, if it's after the sun had gone down, he said, that rain fell outside the time that you agreed to give me the water. So he said, that's not, it's not counted, and I want my money. You said you were going to pay me a certain amount of money, and I want my money. So not too good. I says, wow, man, yeah. So he puts on a tallis, he goes into the Beis HaMikdash again, he prays, he says, Hashem, you have to help me. He said, I didn't do this for any other reason. I did it that all the oil regodim. I did it for your sake, All the oil regodim should have to drink. So you know what happens? All of a sudden the sun, how do you call it?
Comes back.
The sun stops, where it was. And it had already gone down, but not only stopped, but it sort of came back up again to a certain point and then stopped. So everybody's eyes, just, shot over their heads and said, what on earth is going here? So all of a sudden, you know, like Divan Ben Gurion, he comes very happily out of the base of Mikdash, and boom, he runs into this, he meets this guy. So the guy said to him, you know, wait a minute, man. He said, where's my money, you know? So Divan Ben Gurion said, but the rain's come down, you know, you got water, I don't owe you a penny. He said, no, but the rain came down after the day's already finished. So he said, therefore you do owe me. So he said, after the day is finished? And he said, and here's the sun, you know. And I said, this guy, he'd been the whole time inside the base of Merchat. While he was in the base of Mikdash, he was in the base of Merchat. But the base of Merchat is, you know, a place where you make a sauna. You know what a sauna is?
Yeah.
A schwitzbad. You know what a schwitzbad is?
Summer.
He makes a whole so he couldn't see what's going on outside. He'd been the whole time making himself beautiful inside the, you know, inside the base of Merchat. All of a sudden, he thinks it's already night. And all of a sudden, he lifts his eyes up to heaven and he sees that, you know, the sun's in the middle of the heaven. So he said, can you pray? And so he goes home. He looks in all the mayonas, and they're all full, and there's all water, and the sun is still in there. So he said, well, I lost the deal.
Wow.
I lost it to like Divan Ben Gurion. So then the Gemara tells in Masechta Gittin, there's a story, what could be that you guys, I don't know, on the night of Tisha B'Av, people learn a certain piece of Gemara that's permitted to learn because it tells about the destruction of the base of Mikdash. That one, the Gemara, this guy. And the Gemara said that when, what's his name, the first Roman general that came, Vespasianus or something.
Vespasian.
Yeah, when he came on Jerusalem, he put a siege around the city, and then later Titus came, and he was the one who finished it off. Oh, the beginning was not Titus. So he put a big siege around Jerusalem, and it's written that Jerusalem had enough food and produce to last for 21 years. Even though they were cut off from all sides. 21 years. And so who is going to provide all the chitim, all the wheat?
Yeah.
Divan Ben Gurion. And he was the big Gwir, and he said, I'm prepared to give all my chitim, and he said, the way I judge, that'll be enough for 21 years. And then there was another big Gwir, and he said he would give something else. Now a third person, he would give drink and everything. So it's enough for 21 years. So what happened? You know what happened? Don't know what happened. There was a few, what the Gemara calls biryoni. They called troublemakers, and they wanted to go out and make war with the Romans. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he taught the Yidden not to go, he saw the situation was very serious. And he felt that the only way was to come to some terms with the Romans. And when he went out, he was very much, he went out, you know, he got especially smuggled out to meet up the Roman general. And had he met up with the Roman, had he persuaded the Roman general completely, then things might have been good. But it's a whole story. And yet these guys, these crazy guys, yeah, they wanted to go out and make war. They wanted to, yeah. So what did they do? They went and they burnt all this 21 years of material that the Dvarim were prepared to give. They burned it all up so that they wouldn't have, you know, what to, and they would be starving, and the only thing to do was to go and make war.
Cool.
And that's what led to all the trouble. That's what brought Rachmanin and Islam to them. So we see that you must always listen to the Chacham. You must always listen to the Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was the Rebbe at the time. Anyway, so what we see that this Divan Ben Gurion, he was a very special person. So the Gemara says over there were three people that the Eibusha stopped the sun for them specially. It was Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, and Divan Ben Gurion.
Wow.
Three people that the Eibusha stopped the sun for them.
Wow.
So, comes along certain great authorities, and they say that l'chorah, there were other people that got the sun stuff for them as well.
In which year are we? I think we're stuck in time right now.
So I just mentioned one of them, Yaakov Avinu, l'chorah. And then there's another famous story in Malachim. Isn't there, Levi? Another famous story in Malachim about Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda. Have you ever heard of Chizkiyahu? He was the greatest Torah teacher of all the kings apart from David HaMelech. He was a very, very great king. And he was also very into Torah mitzvahs and to learning Torah and everything. So I can't tell you, but you know that Sancheru from Babel sent to conquer Jerusalem, you know the whole, and there was this tremendous nest that occurred that they all fled because they heard all these voices and everything, and they all fled, even though there was no way that the Indian could have beat them, because they were tremendous power. So on that particular night, Chizkiyahu, he's the melech of the Jews, and they're all around Jerusalem, and they're all young. They're ready to conquer Jerusalem, and so the people come in to say, and they say to Chizkiyahu, oh, Melech, listen, Melech, what's going to be? You know, what are we going to do? You know, what's going to happen? So Chizkiyahu, Melech said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well. He said, I don't feel so good. He said, I have a bit of a headache and of this. He said, I am going to sleep on my bed. And he said, Hashem hatoiv yaseh hatoiv ve'ino. He said, I'm going to sleep on my bed. And he said, Hashem hatoiv, he will do whatever is good in his eyes. I mean, this guy's the king. I see you guys are all very young. You're a bit overwhelmed. You know, I mean, l'chorah, your eyes should Joel out and talks. He is the king, and the Babylonians are all around the city, and he says, oh yes, I don't feel so well. I'm going to sleep on my bed. Hashem will look after the situation. So what happened? That's exactly what happened. Hashem took care of the situation.
Did you stop the sun?
And these guys, you know, they fled. They were the biggest army in the world. And they all fled with the guns to mine.
Wow.
Yeah, you know the whole story. So Taki, he didn't feel well, Chizkiyahu. And he got sick afterwards. He got really sick. So he goes out and he's walking with Yeshaya Hanavi. You heard of Yeshaya Hanavi? He's walking with Yeshaya Hanavi, and he's thanking Yeshaya Hanavi and helped him, you know, bless the Yidden that there was such a tremendous death. And then all of a sudden, but he said he feels very bad, you know. He's worried that maybe this is his last sickness, you know. He's not feeling good. So it happened a nez. What was the nez? That they were right near the Beis Hamikdash, and on the steps of the Beis Hamikdash, the sun was like shining. Now all of a sudden, what the sun does when it's going down, it moves like down the steps or up the steps. I've forgotten exactly which way it goes. So the sun stopped moving down the steps, and at a certain point it started like going back up the steps, you know, like as if it were, you know, going sort of, not moving or not doing what it usually does. You know, so Chizkiyahu, his eyes just, you know, jumps out, he says to Yeshaya, you know, what is this? You know, what is happening? So Yeshaya Hanavi said, the sun has stopped. And he said, this is in order to show you, this is like a sign from heaven that you're going to keep being the sun. You're going to live, and you're not going to die. So Chizkiyahu, you know, he really collapses, and he all of a sudden he feels better, you know. And he had later a first lamb. Oh my. Anyway, Taisha's over there in Masechta Veda, so said, what's with Chizkiyahu Melech? He was the greatest Melech that the Yidden had, and you mentioned 3 people, and you don't mention him. I thought, that's a big nest that I'm going to do. with the sun. And then he also asked, my kasha about Yaakov Avinu. And he said, what's with Avinu Yaakov? Yeah, he's not important. I mean, the son also did something for Yaakov Avinu. So what do we do with all these things? You know? So there's one answer that Tosfos gives, and that's a little bit sort of complex. I notice I'm running short of time, so I'm going to tell you the main teretz I want to deal with is the second answer in Tosfos, and Tosfos says a very amazing thing. He says like this. He said the whole universe it functions around the sun and around the movements of the orbits and everything, and if they move, if they keep moving, then it's not such a danger to all the rest of the universe, and it's not such a big nest that they might sort of move not at the usual times or something. He said the main thing is that they're moving.
Ah, but they stand.
Yeah. Now, wait a minute. So he said, what was the big thing with Moshe Rabbeinu here, and with Yeshua, and with Makdima ben Gurion? Now remember, this Makdima ben Gurion, he was not one of the Chachmei Yisrael. He was just a big Vera. He was a very helpful person, and he tried to save Yerushalayim. He was a very amazing guy. But he wasn't, from the Chachamim. He was just a very special, rich man, So, in their case, Hashem stopped the sun. That's what Tosfos said. And then he says, but in the case of Chizkiyahu, he said, didn't stop the sun. Now what did he do? He made it move a bit, in the opposite direction. But it was moving. So Tosfos says a most amazing thing, that as long as it was moving, even if it's moving a little bit in the other direction, then that's okay. That's not such a tremendous nest, because everything is okay. It's moving. If it stops, it's not okay. If it stops, that's just inexplicably beyond nature, and that is the biggest of all missing.
Wow.
So that's the most amazing statement. And the Maram Lublin over there in Masakta Veda Zorah, he's Malve, what Tosfos says, he was the son-in-law of the Marshal, the Maram Lublin, or maybe he was the son-in-law of the Marshal, I forgot. He was the son-in-law of one of the great other Meforshim, and he says exactly that. He says that as long as the heavenly bodies even if they move in slightly different directions, then, it's not such a big nest. That makes sense. He said when they stop, then they can also all confuse one another and intercollide. That's what he says, the Maram. So therefore he said, these three people are mentioned, and he said, with Yaakov Avinu, whatever it was, the sun was moving, as we're here. Hashem just brought it up a bit earlier. Hashem brought it up a bit earlier, and he made it come down a bit earlier. You remember in the time when Yaakov Avinu needed to come, he made it come down a bit earlier, and he said, that's okay, because it's moving. He just altered the timetable of it, but it was going, Karagil. The same with Chizkiyahu, was just going a bit of the other way. And then he says something about Kayin, that Hashem made a os, to Kayin, that nobody would get at him, also something to do with the sun in the heaven. And he says over there the same thing, that it was moving. Now, I remember, I want to tell you guys the story, when I first started working in yeshiva in Kwachabad, I had a Talmud that he had a master of physics. He was, he had a very good degree, and he was very much into physics. So we learned a Maimah from the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek in Derech Mitzvah Sefer, and over there the Rebbe writes something about how the heavenly bodies or something. He says something there based on what is the view of Chassidus about. So I remember when we learned this inside, all of a sudden he says to me, he said, that's not according to present day theories, you know. He asked me in the class, and he said, present day theories, physics holds something different, that this moves this way and something else moves gravity and this and that. He started shooting me all these things. I didn't know what to say. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist. So I said, well, but this is what the Talmud Tzedek says. So he said, oh, okay. So I could see he wasn't very, convinced. But what am I supposed to do? So you know what? Later on, I'm in the Zal in the afternoon. In those days, I used to be like not like I am nowadays. I used to finish having lunch, and I'd take a little break, and then I'd come into the Zal, and the whole afternoon I'd answer questions, and I'd talk with the guys, and all sorts of things. So I'm sitting there, and I'm answering questions, and all of a sudden he comes up to me, just told me. You know what he said to me? He said to me a most amazing thing. He said, he said, what's the difference between me and the Rebbe that Talmud Tzedek? He said, the difference is that the Rebbe that Talmud Tzedek feared God in a way that I'll never be able to fear God. So he said, if I'll improve in my fearing of God, then maybe I'll understand what he meant. That's what he said. So my eyes just, jolted out in stalks. When I heard that, so I said to him, thanks, Avram, for having said that, I understand what you say. I'm a couple what you say. You can go back and sit down and go ahead with the studies, but thank you for that, Ramah. So one of the other big Rosh Hashivas, he's still alive in Kwachabad today. He should live to 120 years. He was sitting not far from me. So I knew to myself, up to him, I said, you see that boy over there? He's going to be a chassid. That's exactly what it's okay. He's a chassid to this day. He's got, he didn't have a lot of children, but he's got a couple of children. He's got grandchildren, and he's a chassid in the row of Chabad children. I said to him, he's going to be a chassid. So he said, what's the proof? I said, he answered me now an answer that means he's going to be a chassid. He said if he'll be more Yira Shamayim, then he'll understand what the Talmud Tzedek is. Even though it's against physics. Then he'll understand. But I'm the same thing with this teacher. Teacher says that if it goes back the other way, it doesn't matter. As long as it's moving. I'm going to go back the other way, look where everything's going to... Who knows what? Says Teacher, no, if it goes back the other way, it doesn't matter. As long as you're moving. If you're a heavenly body, you've got to be moving. If you come to status quo and you stand, that's the greatest of all nations. So, I looked up this morning in the Tzemach Tzedek, in the same Sefer, it's not the same feast, but in the same Sefer. And the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek says, and later I found it in one of the Rishonim, it's written in the Rabbeinu B'Chaya. And he says, why did Yeshua say to the sun, doing, be quiet? He should have said, stop, stand where you are. Why did he say Shemesh be given doing? So the Tzemach Tzedek says, and I saw the Rabbeinu B'Chaya says the same thing. He said, how do the heavenly bodies move? What makes them move?
Speak.
He said that what makes them move is because they're saying Shirah.
Sure.
And the Tzemach Tzedek says, in the name of the Rizal, yesterday was the Rizal outside. He says in the name of the Rizal that everything in the Bria is saying a certain form of song to the earth.
Singing.
Everything.
Wow.
And nowadays, I think there's a certain theory. I'm not up to all these inyanim, but I heard and I read in a book that there's a certain theory that they hold that how is it all the heavenly bodies interrelate and everything? Because they've all got like a how do you call it? What we call a shira, but they have like something that they're saying, and they interrelate by sending messages one to the other through what they're saying. All the heavenly body. So the Tzemach Tzedek says that what makes the heavenly bodies move is that they all move in the direction of the sun. You know? They all sort of go down, or they go down into the west. Because the Shekhinah is B'marav. That's another whole story. Because they all, as it were, the Shira brings them to a form of bowing. They, as it were, they bow down to Hashem. And the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, says that that's what gives them the possibility of giving over to the world.
Wow.
And that's the way, because they bow down to Hashem and they sing His praise, that's what gives them the ability to give over everything into the world.
Like us.
And isn't that the opposite of Avodah Zorah? The opposite of all those people who served the sun, but they thought the sun was the big balabas. And the Tzemach Tzedek says, no, the sun is nothing. He said, but because the sun bows down, then through that, he's so botel to Hashem, he's able to give, he becomes like a media through which Hashem's influence comes into the world. Hashem could just give us the influence straight. What does he have to have the sun? That's another in him. He wanted that it should go that way. And Hashem wanted that we should come to recognize Him through all of the greatness of the creation. And it wouldn't be a trick if there was nothing but Hashem and just us. And therefore, that's what the Tzemach Tzedek said. Therefore, Yeshua said to the sun, and Moshe Rabbeinu here, the same thing. When the Milchemes Sichain, that Moshe Rabbeinu said, doing. You have to go quiet. And once the sun stopped singing its shira, it remained motionless. It doesn't have what to go forward. There's nothing to move it forward. So it stopped. And as long as he didn't say to it, start singing again, then it just stood there. And that's what the Gemara said, 48 hours is a long time. It stood there and waited to get the okay to start singing. Isn't that that's mind-boggling? Anyway, what do we see? We see the three people who got the big mention. Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, and Nakdim Ben Gurion. So the question occurred to me that Yeshua, he got it written openly it's written openly in the Nach. Yeshua said this, and the son stopped him. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get a clear message. It's brought down in the Gemara. If not Rashi, it's brought down in the Targum Yenos of Ben Uzziah. But if not the Targum Yenos of Ben Uzziah, we wouldn't know that. We wouldn't know that there was a war of Sicha. We didn't know. So Kumtai said, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get, a big open mention, and Yeshua does. And Nakdim Ben Gurion also. He doesn't get a clear mention. And the Gemara said, if it hadn't been for the Gemara means like Kabbalah, Ish Mipish, we wouldn't know about Nakdim Ben Gurion. We know through the Gemara. So it's funny I jumped. So I looked at another great person that he also lived here in Tzfaz, and he was called the Shach al Torah. He's a Sifsei Kohen. He was a Kohen. Sifsei Kohen al Torah, and he was a Talmud of the Ramak. You heard of the Ramak, the Rabbeinu Moshe Korovir. He also lived here. The Rizal came to Tzfaz a few weeks before he passed away. Anyway, the Shach al Torah says, Moshe Rabbeinu. He said, for Moshe Rabbeinu to stop the sun, no big surprising in it. Nobody's going to be at all surprised about that. So you don't have to mention it openly. It comes on the Gemara, and the Gemara tells us it should know. Moshe Rabbeinu stopped the sun. But he said, Moshe Rabbeinu is incomparably great, that for him, stopping the sun, What's the proof? He said in Mitzrayim, when there were 3 days of darkness, you know, in Mitzrayim, the 3 days of darkness by the Mitzrayim, where was the sun then? It was only shining by the Eden. By the rest of the world, it wasn't around. I mean, that's a big one. It did shine, but it didn't. So he said, who managed that?
Moshe.
I see you getting tired.
Moses.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, you're worn out already.
I'm not. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
okay. I want to.
But
I want
who
to.
managed that?
Moshe.
Moshe.
Moses.
So he said, you see from that, Moshe Rabbeinu, he could organize the sun, you know, any old how, as you might say. You could have it shining here, and you could have it dark over here, you know. No problem. So he said, Moshe Rabbeinu, he said, Yeshua is a much lower level, Kavichol. I mean, he's also a great leader. But the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu's face was like the sun, and Yeshua is like the moon. You know, it's not the same greatness. So by Yeshua, it had to be mentioned clearly, and it was brought down. Otherwise, we might not have assumed. But Moshe Rabbeinu, we would have assumed anyway. Oh, it was Yeshua, we had it written before. Nakdiman Ben Gurion, he doesn't say it, but what he means is that Nakdiman Ben Gurion was a chassid. And he was very devoted to Moshe Rabbeinu. Remember, he also, he was devoted to Moshe Rabbeinu's way, as he also got the sun stuff for him. But he was what you call, a chassid. He was like a Ish person, he was like sort of drawn in to the thing because he was so devoted to Moshe Rabbeinu's way. And so what do you learn from that, you guys? That you should realize that when you go out on the street, you're a chassid, you're Nakdim Ben Gurion. When you go out on the street and you give other people to put on tefillin or you do something good, you have the power to stop the sun. The Rebbe's got the ability to stop the sun, that's possible. The Baal Shem Tov, she just, animals get up on their feet, Reb Mechel is Latishvi, he had the sun coming in and it was dark somewhere else. It's no trouble, No worry. Why didn't the Rebbe stop the sun every few minutes? Because that's not his job. The miracles by the Rebbeim, the famous statement of the Alter Rebbe, that the miracles are by me under the table. Anybody wants to reach downwards, you can get to the miracle. Anyway, from that it follows that, the Rebbeim, they don't need to, that's it. A chassid, like Nakdim Ben Gurion, he did a very wonderful thing. You know what happened? The sun stopped. He's connected with the way of Moshe Rabbeinu, the sun stopped. So the same, we've got to realize that all the heavenly bodies, everything, it's all just part of a huge plan. It's not something that, it's got some sort of absolute value in its own right. It's only there to make sure it does the right thing. That's what all of these things tell. If not, boom, go back the other way. Move back the other way. And that's not such a big deal. Even to stop it for Moshe Rabbeinu is not such a big deal. And remember, we've got to realize that we've got the Rebbe, and the Rebbe has done the most amazing thing. The Rebbe has stopped the sun. The Rebbe has brought the whole world to realize that Mashiach has come. The whole world.
Amazing.
Everything. So you ask anybody in the street, oh, Mashiach, oh yeah. Where did you hear that from? Oh yes, Rebbe Chabad. People know. All through Goyim. They shouldn't. All talking about something's happening and moving towards something. Oh man, Kanye, he wrote some, take of me out. We should see the really big sun. They're moving down into full operation, the Gula Shlema Alidei Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Amen. Ay, 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 ay.